Rosie Thornhill screamed for 9 nights straight. 8 nannies had quit. 7 doctors found nothing wrong. The billionaire's daughter was breaking and no one knew why. The pediatric specialists at Greenwich Medical ran every test modern medicine could offer. Blood panels, brain scans, sleep studies, genetic screenings. Each result came back the same. Normal, healthy, fine. But Rosie Thornhill, 3 years old, with her mother's dark curls and her father's grey eyes, was not fine. She woke at 2 in the morning every morning screaming until her voice cracked. She refused food. She wet the bed. She rocked in corners, arms wrapped tight around a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. The doctors prescribed anxiety medication for a toddler. The therapists suggested behavioral modification. The nannies, one after another, packed their bags and walked out the mansion's front door muttering about impossible children and parents who didn't understand discipline. Preston Thornhill stood in his daughter's doorway on a Tuesday morning in late October watching her sleep. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Tokyo, Shanghai, London. The world demanded his attention, but all he could see was the small body curled into a defensive ball even in sleep. His wife Catherine would have known what to do. Catherine had always known. But Catherine had been gone for 2 years, killed by a drunk driver on a rainy Wednesday evening, and Preston had been lost ever since. He left for the airport at dawn. Who always left for the airport at dawn. Lorelei Winters walked into the Thornhill mansion expecting to clean floors. What she found was a child crying behind locked doors and a fiancé who smiled too perfectly. The estate sat on 5 acres of manicured Connecticut landscape, hidden behind iron gates and ancient oak trees. The kind of place that appeared in architectural magazines, with captions about American success and generational wealth. Lorelei had seen the photos online when the employment agency sent her the listing. Live-in housekeeper, private quarters, generous salary, background check required. She needed the job, needed it like drowning people need air. 20 months ago, her daughter Emmeline had drowned in a neighbor's pool during a birthday party. 5 years old, blonde pigtails and a gap-toothed smile gone in the time it took Lorelei to refill a juice cup. The grief had swallowed everything. Her marriage, her home, her will to exist. She'd spent a year in a fog moving through days like a ghost until her sister finally sat her down and said the words that hurt because they were true. Living for Emmy means living. So Lorelei lived. She took the job. She packed her single suitcase and rode the bus north from New Haven, watching autumn leaves blur past the window. She told herself this was forward motion, progress, survival. The mansion's front door opened before she could knock. A woman stood in the doorway, tall and elegant, in a cream cashmere sweater and tailored slacks. Dark hair pulled into a sleek bun, diamond earrings catching the morning light. Vivian Blackwood extended a hand, her grip firm and brief. "You must be Lorelei. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality." Vivian's expression was pleasant, but controlled like a mask worn for so long it had become a second face. Lorelei recognized it immediately. She'd seen it before in hospital waiting rooms and funeral homes. The look people wore when they wanted you to stop asking questions. "The quarters are through the back," Vivian said, leading her through a foyer with marble floors and a crystal chandelier. "You'll have a private bedroom and bath, meals in the main kitchen. Preston travels extensively, so I manage the household. Any questions come to me first." Her heels clicked against the marble with military precision. Everything about Vivian Blackwood was precise. Her posture, her words, the way she touched nothing as she walked as if the house might contaminate her. They passed through a living room that looked like it had never been lived in. White furniture arranged at perfect angles. Abstract art on the walls. Fresh flowers in crystal vases. No toys, no books, no evidence that a child existed here at all. "Rosie is Preston's daughter from his first marriage." Vivian continued, her tone neutral, clinical. "She's been difficult since her mother passed. The doctors say it's behavioral. Attention seeking. We're addressing it. We. The word landed wrong in Lorelai's chest. How old is she? Lorelai asked. 3, almost 4. Vivian paused at a closed door, her hand resting on the knob. She's napping now, best not to disturb her. She doesn't sleep well at night, so we let her rest when she can. Through the door came a sound. Small, muffled. Not quite a cry, but close. Lorelai's body responded before her mind caught up, every cell remembering. The maternal instinct didn't die with your child. It lingered, phantom limb syndrome of the heart, reaching for someone who wasn't there anymore. Is she all right? The words came out before Lorelai could stop them. Vivian's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. She's fine, just restless. The pediatrician says children this age often make noise in their sleep. But Lorelai had been a mother. She knew the difference between sleep sounds and distress sounds. This was distress. Vivian moved on the moment passing. She showed Lorelai the kitchen, the laundry room, the supply closets, explained the schedule, the expectations, the boundaries. Preston worked in technology, something about artificial intelligence and venture capital that Lorelai didn't fully understand. He traveled 3 weeks out of every month. When he was home, he was in his office on conference calls that stretched past midnight. Vivian managed everything else. The household, the staff, the child. I'm sure we'll get along wonderfully, Vivian said as they reached Lorelai's quarters, a small but comfortable room behind the main house. As long as we understand each other. The words sounded like a warning wrapped in politeness. Lorelai unpacked her single suitcase that evening. 3 pairs of jeans, 5 t-shirts, her daughter's baby blanket, the yellow one with embroidered ducks still faintly smelling of Johnson's baby shampoo. She folded it carefully and placed it under her pillow where she could reach for it in the dark. At 2:47 in the morning, the screaming started. Lorelai jolted awake disoriented. For one terrible second, she thought it was Emmeline, that she was back in their old apartment, that the last 20 months had been the nightmare, that her daughter was alive and crying and needed her. Then reality crashed back. Different room, different house, different child. But the screaming didn't stop. Lorelai pulled on her robe and stepped into the cool October night. The main house glowed softly through tall windows. She moved toward the sound, her heart hammering, following the cries through the back entrance into the kitchen. The screaming came from upstairs, high and raw and terrified. The sound of a child who had screamed so many times, her voice had learned the shape of fear. Lorelai stood at the base of the stairs, uncertain. This wasn't her house, not her child. She was the help. Hired yesterday, she had no right to intrude. The screaming intensified. Her feet moved before her brain authorized the decision. Up the stairs, down the hallway, following the sound to a closed door with a small painted sign. Rosie's room. Butterflies and flowers rendered in cheerful pastels, grotesque against the sounds coming from within. Lorelai knocked, waited, knocked again. No response except the crying. She tried the handle. Locked. Hello. Her voice felt small in the vast hallway. Is everything all right? The crying stopped abruptly. Silence fell thick and wrong. Then footsteps. The lock clicked. The door opened 6 inches. Vivian stood in the gap wearing silk pajamas and a carefully neutral expression. Behind her in the dim room, Lorelai caught a glimpse of a small figure on the bed, curled tight. Did we wake you? Vivian asked, her voice pleasant, unconcerned. I'm so sorry. Rosie has night terrors. The pediatrician says it's quite common at this age. Is she hurt? Of course not. The practiced calm held steady. She's just overtired. Children can be so dramatic when they want attention. Best to let her settle on her own. Coddling only reinforces the behavior. Coddling. The word tasted bitter. Lorelai wanted to push past to go to the child to offer comfort, but Vivian's body blocked the doorway immovable. I appreciate your concern, Vivian continued, but I've been managing Rosie's care for 18 months. I know what she needs. You focus on the housework. I'll handle the child. The door closed. The lock clicked back into place. Lorelei stood in the hallway as the crying resumed, softer now, defeated. She pressed her palm against the door, feeling the vibration of small fists pounding from the other side. She went back to her room. She didn't sleep. The next morning, Lorelei met Rosie properly. The child sat at the kitchen table, small and still in a wrinkled nightgown. Dark curls tangled around a pale face. Grey eyes, too large, too watchful for someone so young. A bowl of oatmeal sat untouched in front of her. Vivian stood by the coffee maker, scrolling through her phone. Rosie, say good morning to Miss Lorelei. Vivian instructed without looking up. Rosie said nothing. Her eyes tracked to Lorelei, held for a moment, then dropped to the table. Rosie, Vivian's voice sharpened. Manners. The child flinched, barely. Just a tightening of small shoulders. But Lorelei saw it. She'd seen it before in the pediatrician's office with Emmeline after particularly rough nights. The body's involuntary response to anticipated pain. It's all right, Lorelei said quickly, moving to the sink to give the child space. Not everyone's a morning person. Vivian's gaze lifted from her phone, cool and assessing. Consistency is important with children. They need structure, rules, consequences when they misbehave. Of course, Lorelei agreed, though something in her stomach twisted. Vivian poured coffee into a travel mug. I have appointments today. The housekeeper duties are listed on the refrigerator. Rosie will be in the playroom until lunch. She's not to leave without permission. Don't let her manipulate you with tears. She's very skilled at that. She left without kissing the child goodbye. The kitchen fell quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and Rosie's shallow breathing. Lorelei waited until the front door closed and Vivian's car pulled down the driveway before she moved to the table. She sat across from Rosie, keeping distance, making herself smaller. Hi Rosie, I'm Lorelei, but you can call me Lori if that's easier. The child's eyes flicked up, wary, calculating, ancient wisdom in a baby face. I'm sorry you had a bad night, Lorelei continued softly. Night terrors are scary. I used to get them when I was little. This was a lie, but it was a kind lie. Rosie's fingers twisted in her nightgown. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered so quietly, Lorelei, you almost missed it. She doesn't like when I cry. The words landed like stones, simple, devastating. Who doesn't? Lorelei asked, though she already knew. Rosie's eyes darted to the doorway, checking for eavesdroppers. Miss Vivian, she says crying is for babies. I'm not supposed to be a baby anymore. 3 years old, barely out of diapers, being told she was too old to cry. Lorelei's throat tightened. Everyone cries sometimes, sweetheart, even grown-ups. It's okay to be sad, or scared, or hurt. Rosie studied her with those two knowing eyes. You won't tell. I won't tell. A pause. Then, with great deliberation, Rosie picked up her spoon and took one small bite of cold oatmeal. An offering. A beginning of trust. They sat together in the morning light, a grieving woman and a frightened child, finding each other in the wreckage. The days fell into a pattern. Lorelei cleaned. Vivian managed. Rosie existed in the spaces between them, quiet and careful, moving through the mansion like a ghost in her own home. Preston came home on Thursday evening. Lorelei heard his arrival from the laundry room. The garage door opening, car door slamming, heavy footsteps in the kitchen. Vivian's voice bright and performative. Darling, I didn't expect you until tomorrow. Meetings got cancelled. His voice was tired deep. Where's Rosie? Playroom. She's been good today. Mostly. The qualifier hung in the air. Lorelei moved to the doorway, staying in shadow. Preston Thornhill looked like his photographs. Tall, broad-shouldered, silver threading through dark hair despite being somewhere in his 40s. Expensive suit rumpled from travel. Exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes. He set down his briefcase and moved toward the playroom without removing his jacket. Vivian followed, heels clicking. Preston, you should rest. You look dreadful. I want to see my daughter. They disappeared down the hallway. Lorelai stayed where she was listening. Daddy, the joy in that single word, pure and real and heartbreaking. There's my girl. Preston's voice transformed, softening. Did you miss me? I drew you pictures. Want to see. I'd love to see. For several minutes, there was only the sound of a father and daughter reuniting. Paper rustling. Preston's gentle questions. Rosie's excited answers. The way things should always sound. Then, Vivian's voice measured and careful. Preston, we need to discuss Rosie's behavior while you were gone. She's been having episodes again. Tantrums. Refusing to eat. The new nanny quit after 3 days. Another one. The exhaustion returned to Preston's voice. What happened? The same as always. Rosie acts out for attention. The nanny enables it. I have to be the disciplinarian, and then I'm painted as the villain. It's exhausting. A pause. Maybe we should try a different approach. We've tried 7 different approaches. 8 nannies, 3 therapists. The pediatrician says it's her personality. Some children are simply more difficult than others. Lorelai's hands clenched around the dish towel. She wanted to interrupt to defend the child who couldn't defend herself. But she'd been there 4 days. Vivian had been there 18 months. Who would Preston believe she went back to folding laundry? But she listened, always listening. That night, after Preston retired to his office for conference calls, and Vivian went to her book club, Lorelai found Rosie alone in the playroom. The child sat surrounded by toys she wasn't playing with, holding her worn rabbit, humming a tuneless melody. "Hi, sweetheart," Lorelai said from the doorway. "Mind if I join you?" Rosie looked up surprised. Adults didn't usually ask permission to enter her space. "Okay." Lorelai sat on the floor, her back against the wall, giving Rosie control of the distance between them. They existed in comfortable silence for several minutes. Then Rosie spoke. "My mommy died." The words were matter of fact, testing, watching for Lorelai's reaction. "I know," Lorelai said gently. "I'm very sorry. Miss Vivian says I shouldn't talk about mommy. It makes daddy sad. Sometimes people think not talking about sad things makes them go away, but that's not really how it works." Rosie considered this. "Do you have a mommy?" "I do, and I had a daughter. Her name was Emmeline. She died too." The words still hurt to say. They probably always would, but Rosie's eyes widened, recognizing a fellow traveler in grief. "Does talking about her make you sad?" "Yes," Lorelai admitted, "but remembering her makes me happy too. Both things can be true at the same time." Rosie nodded slowly, processing this adult complexity. Then she did something that broke and healed Lorelai simultaneously. She stood up, walked over, and placed her rabbit in Lorelai's lap. "You can hold him when you're sad. He helps." Lorelai accepted the gift with reverent hands. "Thank you, Rosie. That's very kind." They sat together until Vivian's car pulled into the driveway. Then Rosie grabbed her rabbit back and retreated to the far corner of the playroom, her brief openness vanishing like it had never existed. Lorelai understood. Trust was a fragile thing. It had to be earned in moments, protected in silence. The iron came out on Saturday afternoon. Preston had left that morning for San Francisco. Another emergency, another meeting. Another week of absence. Vivian waited exactly 1 hour after his departure before calling Rosie downstairs. Lorelai was in the dining room polishing silver when she heard Vivian's voice, sweet as poisoned honey. "Rosie, come here, please. We need to discuss your behavior last night." Lorelai's hands stilled. She'd heard the crying around midnight. Brief, quickly muffled. She'd stood outside her door debating intervention, ultimately choosing cowardice over courage. She told herself it wasn't her place, that she'd misjudged, that surely Vivian had it under control. Now she set down the polish and moved toward the kitchen, every instinct screaming warning. "I asked you a simple question." Vivian was saying, her voice still pleasant, still controlled. "Did you go into my jewelry box without permission?" "I didn't." Rosie's voice climbed with panic. "I promise I didn't. Someone moved my pearls, And you're the only one who's been in my room. So either you're lying or we have a ghost. I didn't touch them. I wouldn't. I know I'm not supposed to. Stop whining. It's unbecoming. Lorelai reached the kitchen doorway and stopped, her breath catching. Vivian stood by the ironing board, dressed impeccably in dark slacks and a silk blouse. The clothes iron sat on the board, plugged in, heating. Steam rose from its surface in lazy curls. Rosie stood 3 feet away, backed against the kitchen cabinets, her small body rigid with terror. "When you touch things that don't belong to you," Vivian said, her voice soft, almost gentle, "you need to learn consequences." She picked up the iron. The world sharpened into crystalline focus. Lorelai saw everything. The deliberate way Vivian's fingers curled around the handle, the steam hissing from the vents. Rosie's eyes wide and glazed with a fear that went beyond the moment a fear learned through repetition. The bruise on the child's forearm faded yellow-green, exactly the size and shape of an iron's pointed tip. This had happened before. Pain teaches better than words. Vivian continued, moving one step closer. "Your mother was too soft with you, but I'm helping you become better, stronger. You'll thank me someday." Rosie's legs gave out. She slid down the cabinet to the floor, arms over her head, whimpering. Not screaming, not fighting, already defeated. "Stop!" Lorelai's voice cut through the room like a blade. She didn't remember moving, but suddenly she was between them, her body blocking Vivian's path to the child, her hands shaking with rage and terror and absolute certainty. "Get away from her." Vivian's expression flickered, surprise, then annoyance, then cold calculation. She lowered the iron slightly, but didn't set it down. "Excuse me." "You heard me." Lorelai's voice came from somewhere deep and primal, the voice that had screamed for Emmeline in those first horrible moments at the pool. "Put down the iron and step away from this child, now. This is not your concern." Vivian's controlled demeanor held. "You work for this family. You don't question how I discipline." Discipline. The word came out strangled. "You're threatening to burn a 3-year-old child." "I'm teaching her about consequences, something her father is too weak to do." Behind Lorelai, Rosie had begun to cry. Soft hiccuping sobs that spoke of nights spent crying alone, of a body that had learned there was no comfort coming. Lorelai crouched down, keeping herself between Vivienne and Rosie, making herself a shield. She reached back blindly and felt small fingers grab onto her shirt, bunching the fabric, holding on like Lorelai was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. "It's okay, sweetheart," Lorelai whispered. "I've got you. She's not going to hurt you." "How dare you?" Vivian's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You've been here less than a week. You know nothing about this child or what she needs." "I know enough." They stared at each other across 3 feet of kitchen tile. Two women, two different kinds of love, or what passed for it. One twisted and controlling, the other raw and defensive. Finally Vivian smiled. It was a terrible expression, the kind that promised the consequences. "You're making a very serious mistake," she said calmly. She turned off the iron and set it down on the board with careful precision. "When Preston gets back from San Francisco, we're going to have a conversation about employees who don't understand boundaries, about people who overstep their position and spread malicious lies about the family that employs them." She walked past them, expensive perfume trailing like a threat, and left the kitchen without looking back. Lorelai stayed on the floor, her arms around Rosie, feeling the child's heart hammer against her ribs. The small body shook with suppressed sobs. Around them the kitchen settled back into normal. The refrigerator hummed. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The iron cooled on the board, innocent and terrible. "It's okay," Lorelai whispered again, rocking slightly. "You're safe. I promise, you're safe." But even as she said the words, she knew they were a lie. Because Vivian Blackwood had been threatening a child with burns and Lorelai had stopped her, and now there would be consequences for both of them. Rosie pulled back slightly, her face blotchy and wet, and looked at Lorelai with those knowing eyes. "She's going to hurt you too," the child whispered. "She hurts everyone." Lorelei's throat closed. She cupped Rosie's small face in her hands, thumbs wiping away tears. "Let her try," she said fiercely. "I'm not going anywhere. You hear me? I'm not leaving you." She didn't know if it was a promise she could keep. She didn't know if Vivian would have her fired or arrested or worse. But she knew with bone-deep certainty that she couldn't walk away. Not from this child. Not from this fight. She'd failed to save Emmeline. Maybe she could save Rosie. They sat together on the kitchen floor until Rosie's breathing evened out and her grip loosened. Then Lorelei carried her upstairs, tucked her into bed, and sat in the hallway, outside her door, standing guard. She didn't sleep that night. She couldn't, because she'd seen what she'd seen, and there was no going back. The iron sat cooling on the kitchen counter. The bruise on Rosie's arm was fading but real. And Vivian Blackwood's knowing expression lingered in Lorelei's mind, promising retribution. Somewhere in the house, danger waited. But so did Lorelei Winters, a mother who'd lost her own child and refused to let another one fall. The war had begun. Neither of them knew it yet, but there would be no peaceful resolution. Only truth, justice, or destruction. And Lorelei had already chosen her side. The next morning, Lorelei woke with a plan forming in her mind like frost on glass. Delicate, dangerous, necessary. She would spend the night cataloguing everything she'd seen. The bruise on Rosie's arm, the terror in the child's eyes, the practiced way Vivian had wielded that iron not in rage but with calculated precision. This wasn't a moment of lost control. This was routine. Lorelei needed proof. Evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Because when she confronted Preston Thornhill with accusations against the woman he planned to marry, she would get exactly one chance to be believed. She dressed in the pre-dawn darkness and walked through the quiet house. The mansion felt different at this hour, less imposing, more honest. She paused outside Rosie's door, listening. Silence. The child was finally sleeping. Vivian's office was at the end of the east wing, a converted library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a mahogany desk that probably cost more than Lorelei had earned in 5 years. The door was closed but not locked. Vivian's arrogance, perhaps, or her certainty that no one would dare intrude on her private space. Lorelei turned the handle and slipped inside. The office smelled of expensive perfume and old books. Dawn light filtered through heavy curtains, casting everything in shades of grey. Lorelei moved to the desk, her heart hammering so loud she was certain it would wake the entire house. The top drawer held ordinary things, pens, notepads, stamps, but the bottom drawer was locked. Lorelei stared at it, frustration rising. Of course Vivian would lock away anything important. She tried the desk again, systematically feeling along the underside of each drawer for a hidden key. Nothing. She checked the bookshelf, running her fingers along spines. Still nothing. Then she saw it. A small wooden box on the credenza carved with elaborate flowers. The kind of box people kept for sentimental items. Lorelei lifted the lid. Inside lay a silver key and a photograph. The photo showed a younger Vivian, perhaps in her 20s, standing beside an older woman. Both wore formal dresses. Both had the same sharp features. The older woman's hand rested on Vivian's shoulder with a grip that looked more like control than affection. Lorelei took the key and returned to the desk. The locked drawer opened with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the quiet room. Inside were folders, medical records, legal documents, bank statements. Lorelei pulled out her phone, the old one she'd bought at a pawn shop, because she couldn't afford anything better, and began photographing pages, her hands shaking. Catherine Ashford's death certificate. Accidental vehicular homicide. The driver had been drunk speeding through a residential area on a Wednesday night. Catherine had died on impact. She'd been 39 years old. Beneath that, Catherine's will. Lorelei skimmed the legal language, her chest tightening, as she understood what she was reading. The bulk of Catherine's estate, accumulated through her own successful career as an architect, went into a trust fund for Rosie. $80 million untouchable until Rosie turned 5 years old. At that point, the child could access the interest for education and medical expenses. At 18, she'd inherit everything. But there was a clause, a terrible specific clause. If Rosie was declared mentally incompetent or legally unfit to manage her own affairs, control of the trust would pass to her legal guardian, Preston Thornhill, and upon his death or remarriage to his spouse. Lorelai read the words 3 times, ice spreading through her veins. She flipped to the next document, a draft petition for psychiatric evaluation dated 2 weeks ago, requesting that Rosie Thornhill be assessed for severe behavioral disorders that might require institutional care. The petition cited violent outbursts, inability to bond with caregivers, persistent anxiety that had driven away 8 qualified nannies. All lies, carefully documented lies. The next page was a letter from a psychiatrist Lorelai didn't recognize, Dr. Marcus Venn. He'd agreed to conduct the evaluation and, based on Vivian's thorough documentation, expected to recommend long-term residential treatment for the child's own safety and well-being. Lorelai's stomach turned. She photographed everything, her phone's camera clicking softly in the dim room. At the bottom of the drawer lay a handwritten note on Vivian's personal stationery. The writing was elegant, controlled. The child is the only obstacle. 16 months until she inherits. Must act before then. Marcus agrees. The documentation is sufficient. Preston is too guilty and exhausted to question it. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him if I convince him it's for Rosie's own good. Below that, a single sentence that made Lorelai's blood run cold. Once she's institutionalized, she'll never come out. Lorelai photographed the note with trembling hands. Then, she carefully returned everything to the drawer, locked. It replaced the key in the carved box. She backed out of the office, closing the door with aching slowness, and made it to her room before her legs gave out. She sat on her bed, staring at the photos on her phone. Proof. Undeniable, damning proof. Vivian Blackwood wasn't just abusing Rosie Thornhill. She was systematically destroying a child's mind and spirit to steal her inheritance. The iron wasn't about discipline. It was about breaking Rosie so completely that when the psychiatrist evaluated her, he'd find a child too damaged to function, too traumatized to ever be whole. And it was working. Rosie's night terrors, her refusal to eat, the bedwetting, the nanny's quitting because the child seemed impossible. These weren't symptoms of behavioral problems. They were symptoms of sustained, calculated torture. Lorelai's phone showed 3:47 in the morning. In approximately 3 hours, Vivian would wake, go for her morning run, return for coffee, and begin another day of careful, precise destruction. Unless Lorelai stopped her. She pulled up Preston's contact information from the household directory. Her finger hovered over the call button. But what would she say, sir? I broke into your fiancé's office and found evidence she's trying to have your daughter institutionalized for money. He was in San Francisco. He wouldn't be home for 6 days. 6 days was an eternity. 6 days was enough time for Vivian to do irreparable damage. Lorelai needed more than documents. She needed Preston to see with his own eyes what Vivian really was. But first, she needed to keep Rosie safe. The opportunity came sooner than expected. That afternoon, Vivian appeared in the kitchen dressed in travel clothes, pulling a sleek carry-on suitcase. I have a conference in Boston, she announced. 3 days. There's a list of meals on the refrigerator. Rosie is not to have desserts. She's been gaining weight. Rosie, who was so thin, her collarbones protruded like bird wings, sat at the table, pretending not to listen. I've arranged for a babysitter for the evenings, Vivian continued. Mrs. Patterson from the agency. I can watch her, Lorelai interrupted. Vivian's eyes narrowed. That's not part of your job description. I don't mind. Really, it's no trouble. A pause. Vivian studied Lorelai with those cold, assessing eyes, looking for threat, for challenge, for any reason to say no. Finally, she shrugged. Fine. But if she acts out, I expect you to handle it appropriately. No coddling. She needs firm boundaries. Of course, Vivian left without saying goodbye to Rosie. The child watched through the window as the car disappeared down the driveway. Her small body, rigid with tension, waiting for the trick, for the other shoe to drop. Lorelei counted to 60. Then she turned to Rosie with a gentle expression. Sweetheart, how do you feel about pancakes for dinner? Rosie's eyes went wide. Miss Vivian says pancakes are too much sugar. Miss Vivian isn't here, and I think sometimes rules can be bent a little. What do you say? The child's face transformed. Hope flickered, cautious and fragile but real. With syrup. With syrup and strawberries and whipped cream, if we can find it. For the first time since Lorelei had entered this house, Rosie smiled. A true, genuine 3-year-old smile that crinkled her nose and showed the gap where she'd lost a baby tooth. They made pancakes. They made a mess. Flour dusted the counters, and Rosie laughed. Actually laughed when Lorelei flipped a pancake and it landed on the floor. They ate at the table, and Rosie consumed 3 pancakes with an appetite Lorelei hadn't seen before. More, Lorelei asked. Rosie hesitated. Am I allowed? You're allowed to eat until you're full, sweetheart. That's how bodies work. Rosie ate 2 more pancakes, then she helped clean up standing on a stool to reach the sink washing dishes with intense concentration. When they finished, she turned to Lorelei with those knowing eyes. Are you going to tell Miss Vivian we had pancakes? The question broke Lorelei's heart. No, honey, this is just between us. That night, Rosie went to bed without protest. Lorelei read her 3 stories, tucked her in, and sat in the hallway outside her room, waiting for the inevitable screaming to start. It never came. Rosie slept through the night. No crying, no terror, just the peaceful breathing of a child who for once felt safe. The pattern held for 3 days. Without Vivian in the house, Rosie bloomed like a flower finding sunlight. She ate, she played, she laughed. The shadows under her eyes faded. Her body lost that constant tension, the braced for impact posture that had become her default. On the second day, they went to the park. Rosie ran to the swings, pumping her legs with pure joy, calling for Lorelei to watch. Look at me. Look how high I can go. Look at me being brave. Lorelei pushed her higher, watching the child's dark curls fly, listening to her laughter echo across the playground. This was who Rosie was supposed to be. This bright, curious, joyful little girl. This was who Vivian was systematically erasing. That evening, Lorelei documented everything. She photographed Rosie eating dinner, her plate empty, asking for seconds. She recorded video of Rosie playing with dolls, acting out elaborate stories where the princess saved herself and everyone lived happily ever after. She wrote notes with timestamps. Day 1 without Vivian. Rosie ate 3 full meals, slept through the night, no crying. Day 2, Rosie asked to go to the park, played on swings for 40 minutes, smiled 14 times, laughed. No nightmares. Day 3, Rosie drew a picture of our house. She drew herself in the yard with the sun. She hasn't drawn anything that wasn't dark and violent in months, according to the art on the refrigerator. The evidence was damning in its simplicity. Remove the abuser and the child healed. It wasn't behavioral disorder. It wasn't anxiety. It was terror. Lorelei took Rosie to their family pediatrician on the 3rd day, claiming it was a routine checkup. Dr. Patricia Morrison examined the child thoroughly, her expression growing more concerned with each passing minute. These bruises, she said quietly, indicating fading yellow marks on Rosie's upper arms. How did she get these? Lorelei had prepared for this question. I'm not sure. I've only been working for the family for 2 weeks. But I've seen older bruises that look like they came from deliberate force. Dr. Morrison's eyes met hers. Are you reporting suspected abuse? I'm reporting that I'm concerned, and I think you should document what you see, just in case. The doctor nodded slowly. She photographed the bruises from multiple angles. She asked Rosie gentle questions about how she got hurt. Rosie predictably shut down, shook her head, said she fell down. Kids fall down all the time. But Dr. Morrison added extensive notes to Rosie's file. And when Lorelei left with Rosie's hand in hers, the doctor pressed a business card into her palm. "If you see anything else," she said quietly, "call me immediately. Children can't always speak for themselves. Sometimes we have to speak for them." Lorelei clutched the card like a lifeline. That night, Rosie asked the question Lorelei had been dreading. "Is Miss Vivian coming back?" They were sitting on the floor of the playroom building towers with blocks. Lorelei's hands stilled. "Yes, sweetheart, tomorrow." Rosie's face crumpled. The light that had gradually returned over 3 days extinguished in an instant. "I don't want her to." "I know. Can we leave? Can we go somewhere she can't find us?" The desperation in that small voice shattered something in Lorelei's chest. She pulled Rosie into her lap, wrapping arms around her. "Listen to me, Rosie. I know you're scared, but running away wouldn't keep you safe. It would make things worse." "But she hurts me." The words came out broken. "When Daddy's gone, she hurts me. And when I tell people, they don't believe me. They think I'm bad, that I'm lying." "I believe you." Rosie looked up, tears streaming down her face. "You do. Every word. And I promise you, I'm going to make sure everyone else believes you too. But I need your help." "Can you be brave for me? How?" Lorelei took a steadying breath. "Tomorrow, when Miss Vivian comes back, I need you to try to act normal. I know that's hard, but if she thinks we've been doing things she wouldn't like, she might send me away. And if I go away, I can't protect you. Do you understand?" Rosie nodded, though fear still darkened her eyes. "Good girl. And Rosie, I need you to remember something. No matter what happens, I'm not going to leave you. Even if it looks like I'm gone, I'll come back. I promise." It was a reckless promise, one Lorelei had no guarantee she could keep. But looking at this terrified child, she couldn't offer anything less than absolute commitment. They slept in the same room that night, Rosie in her bed, Lorelei in a sleeping bag on the floor. When Rosie woke from a bad dream around midnight, Lorelei was there immediately, holding her, singing the lullaby she used to sing to Emmeline, promising safety she wasn't sure she could provide. Vivian returned at noon the next day. Lorelei heard the car in the driveway and watched from the kitchen window as Vivian emerged perfectly composed, pulling her suitcase behind her. She looked refreshed, relaxed, ready to resume her work. "I'm home," Vivian called, setting her bag in the foyer. "Where's Rosie?" "Playroom," Lorelei answered, keeping her voice neutral. Vivian moved through the house, heels clicking. Lorelei followed at a distance, every muscle tense. Rosie sat on the playroom floor, hunched over a coloring book. She didn't look up when Vivian entered, didn't acknowledge her presence, a small rebellion that wouldn't go unnoticed. "Rosie." Vivian's voice carried warning. "I said hello." The child's shoulders tightened. "Hi, Miss Vivian. Did you behave while I was gone?" "Yes, ma'am." Vivian's eyes swept the room, cataloging, assessing, looking for evidence of disorder, of rule breaking. Her gaze landed on Lorelei. "Any issues?" "None." Lorelei lied smoothly. She was wonderful. Something flickered in Vivian's expression, suspicion perhaps, or disappointment that there was no misbehavior to punish. "Good. I'm glad to hear you followed the rules." She turned to leave, then paused. "Lorelei," a word in the kitchen. Lorelei's stomach dropped, but she followed. In the kitchen, Vivian poured herself coffee with deliberate slowness. When she finally spoke, her voice was conversational, pleasant, dangerous. "You've become quite attached to Rosie. She's an easy child to care for." "Is she?" Vivian took a sip. "Interesting. The 8 nannies who quit might disagree. Maybe they didn't understand what she needed." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Vivian set down her mug and turned, her expression sharpening. "And you do. After 2 weeks, I understand frightened children. I understand what trauma looks like. Trauma. Vivian's laugh was hollow. You've been reading too many parenting blogs. Rosie isn't traumatized. She's spoiled. Her mother indulged every whim, and now she expects the world to cater to her. Her mother died when she was barely a year old. Exactly. She doesn't even remember Catherine. This acting out is manipulation. She's learned that tears and tantrums get her attention. Lorelai bit back the response burning on her tongue. Instead, she asked carefully, has she always been this way, or did the problems start at a specific time? Vivian's eyes narrowed. What are you implying? Nothing. Just wondering about the timeline. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Two women who understood each other perfectly. Lorelai knew that Vivian was dangerous, and Vivian knew that Lorelai knew. The problem started when Preston began traveling more, Vivian said finally. When he wasn't here to provide structure, that's when Rosie's behavior deteriorated. Another lie. Lorelai had checked the employment records for the nannies. The first one quit 10 months ago, right after Vivian moved into the mansion permanently. The problems had started with Vivian's presence, not Preston's absence. You should be careful, Vivian continued softly, getting too involved, crossing boundaries. Preston hired you to clean his house, not to psychoanalyze his daughter. I'm not. You've been taking her places, the park, the doctor. Don't think I didn't notice the appointment on the calendar. Lorelai's heart hammered. It was just a checkup. Without asking permission, without consulting me. Vivian moved closer, her perfume overwhelming. I have been patient with you, Lorelai. You're grieving your own child. I understand that. But Rosie is not your daughter. She is not your second chance. And if you continue to overstep, I'll have no choice but to discuss your employment with Preston. The threat hung between them unambiguous. I understand, Lorelai said quietly. Good. Vivian's expression softened into something resembling pleasantness. I'm glad we had this conversation. Now I believe there's laundry that needs attention. Dismissed, warned, marked as a problem. Lorelai went to the laundry room, closed the door, and leaned against the washing machine, her whole body shaking. She'd pushed too hard, been too obvious. Vivian was watching her now, suspicious and alert. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos she'd taken, the documents from Vivian's office, the bruises, the images of Rosie, happy and healthy during Vivian's absence. She had evidence. But would it be enough? Preston was due home in 3 days. 3 days to keep Rosie safe. 3 days to figure out how to make him listen. 3 days felt like forever. That night, the crying started again. Lorelai lay in her bed, listening to Rosie's sobs echo through the house. She waited for someone to go to the child, for Vivian to at least check on her. But the crying continued uninterrupted for 30 minutes. Finally, Lorelai couldn't stand it anymore. She left her room and climbed the stairs to Rosie's door. It was locked from the outside. She knocked softly. Vivian, no answer. She knocked louder. The crying inside the room intensified. Open the door, Lorelai said, trying to keep her voice level. Still no response. Lorelai tried the handle again, harder this time. Vivian, the door is locked. Rosie needs to learn to self-soothe. Vivian's voice came from down the hall, calm and unconcerned. The therapist recommended it. Let her cry it out. She'll fall asleep eventually. She's terrified. She's manipulating you. This is exactly what I warned you about. Lorelai's hands clenched on the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at her to break down the door, to go to that child. But Vivian stood in the hallway, watching, waiting for Lorelai to give her a reason to have her fired. Go back to your room, Vivian said. Or I'll call Preston right now and tell him his new housekeeper is interfering with Rosie's treatment plan. Lorelai had no choice. She went back to her room, but she didn't sleep. She listened to Rosie cry for another hour before exhaustion finally claimed the child. And she made a decision. Tomorrow she would set a trap. She would get undeniable proof of what Vivian was doing. And she would make damn sure Preston Thornhill saw the monster he'd invited into his home. The next afternoon, while Vivian was at her Pilates class, Lorelai went to the neighbor's house. Mrs. Brennan was a widow in her 70s who'd lived next door for 40 years. She answered the door with a warm expression. "Lorelai dear, what a nice surprise. Mrs. Brennan, I need to ask you something unusual. Do you still have that old video camera? The one you mentioned?" The older woman's demeanor shifted to concern. "I do. Why?" Lorelai hesitated, then decided honesty was the only option. "I think Rosie Thornhill is being abused, and I need to prove it." Mrs. Brennan studied her for a long moment. Then she went inside and returned with a small digital camera, older model but functional. "My late husband used this for bird watching. Battery still holds a charge. Records up to 2 hours. She pressed it into Lorelai's hands. "Be careful. People who hurt children don't like being caught." "Thank you." That evening, Lorelai set up the camera in Rosie's room. She hid it on a bookshelf angled toward the bed, partially concealed behind a stuffed elephant. The red recording light was dim enough to miss if you weren't looking for it. Vivian had scheduled bedtime for 7:30. Preston was still in San Francisco. The house was quiet. Lorelai told Vivian she was going to run errands, then slipped out the back door. But instead of leaving, she circled around and hid in the garden, watching Rosie's window. At 7:30, exactly the light in Rosie's room turned on. Through the sheer curtains, Lorelai could see Vivian's silhouette moving around the bed. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she could see Rosie's small form, rigid and still. The light stayed on for 20 minutes, then went dark. Lorelai waited another 30 minutes before sneaking back inside. She went straight to Rosie's room. The door was locked again, but she'd anticipated that. She'd found a spare key in the utility room earlier. She unlocked the door as quietly as possible and slipped inside. Rosie was awake, curled in a ball under her blankets. When she saw Lorelai, she gasped. "Shh!" Lorelai whispered. "It's just me." "You came back. I told you I would." Lorelai moved to the bookshelf and retrieved the camera. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart. Everything's okay." She crept back out, locked the door behind her, and went to her room. Her hands shook as she connected the camera to her laptop. The file was 2 hours long. She fast-forwarded it to 7:30. The video showed Vivian entering Rosie's room with a small plastic bucket. She set it on the floor beside the bed. Steam rose from it. "Bath time, Rosie," Vivian said, her voice sweet as poison. "I already had a bath," Rosie replied, her voice small. "Not a real bath, a special bath for girls who forget their place." The camera captured everything. Vivian forcing Rosie's hand into the bucket filled with water hot enough to scald. Rosie screaming. Vivian holding her wrist in place for 15 seconds while the child begged and sobbed. "This is what happens when you whisper to the help," Vivian said calmly. "When you make me look like the villain. Do you understand?" Rosie was crying too hard to answer. "I asked you a question." Yes, I understand." Vivian released her hand. Rosie pulled it back, cradling it against her chest, whimpering. The skin was bright red. "Good. Now go to sleep. And remember, no one will believe you. They never believe bad little girls who tell lies." She left the room, turned off the light, and locked the door from the outside. Lorelai sat frozen, staring at the screen. She'd known it was bad, but hearing that child's screams, seeing Vivian's calm cruelty, she ran to the bathroom and vomited. When she could breathe again, she copied the video file 3 times, one to her phone, one to a cloud storage account, one to a flash drive she kept in her pocket. Then she called Preston Thornhill. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice tired. "Hello. Mr. Thornhill, it's Lorelai Winters. I need you to come home. Now. Tonight." A pause. "What's wrong? Is Rosie hurt?" "Yes, she is. And I have proof of who's hurting her." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Vivian. I have video evidence of her scalding your daughter's hand tonight. I have documents showing she's planning to have Rosie institutionalized to steal her inheritance. And I have 3 days of documentation showing that when Vivian isn't here, Rosie is a completely different child. Silence stretched. Then Preston's voice low and dangerous. If you're lying to me, I'm not lying. And if you don't come home right now, I'm calling the police myself. Another pause. I'll be there in 5 hours. He hung up. Lorelai sat in the dark, her heart pounding. She'd lit the fuse. Now she just had to survive until Preston arrived. She went to Rosie's door and sat in the hallway outside her back against the wall. A guard, a sentinel, a woman who'd failed to save her own daughter but would die before she let this one fall. The house settled into silence around her. Somewhere downstairs, Vivian slept peacefully, certain of her control, but the trap was set, the evidence was secured, and in 5 hours, everything would change. Lorelai closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to whatever God might be listening. Please, let me have been fast enough. Let the proof be enough. Let this child be saved. In her pocket, the flash drive felt like salvation, or a grenade with the pin already pulled. The helicopter landed on the Thornhill estate at 1:17 in the morning. Lorelai heard it before she saw it, the thump of rotors, cutting through darkness, growing louder, violent with urgency. She stood at the window of her small room watching the aircraft descend onto the back lawn like a mechanical bird of prey, its searchlight sweeping across perfectly manicured grass. Preston Thornhill emerged before the blades stopped spinning. He wore the same suit from his San Francisco meetings, wrinkled now his tie loosened. Even from a distance, Lorelai could see the set of his shoulders, the rigid spine of a man preparing for war. She met him at the back entrance, her laptop clutched against her chest. "Show me," he said. No greeting, no preamble. They went to the kitchen. Lorelai set the laptop on the marble counter, her hands shaking as she opened the video file. Preston stood beside her, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. The video played. Rosie's screams filled the silent kitchen. Vivian's calm voice narrating cruelty. The bucket of scalding water. The child's hand held in place while she sobbed and begged. Preston's face drained of color. He gripped the counter-edged knuckles white. When the video ended, he didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there staring at the frozen image on screen, his daughter's face contorted in agony, tears streaming. "There's more," Lorelai said quietly. She pulled up the photos on her phone, the documents from Vivian's office, Catherine's will, the petition for psychiatric evaluation, the handwritten note about institutionalizing Rosie to access the inheritance. Preston read each one, his breathing growing ragged. When he reached the final note, "Once she's institutionalized, she'll never come out," something broke in him. He slammed his palm against the counter so hard the laptop jumped. "How long?" His voice came out strangled. "How long has this been happening?" "I think since Vivian moved in permanently. 10 months, maybe longer. The nannies who quit, they probably saw things too, but she's been very careful. She only hurts Rosie when you're traveling." Preston turned away, one hand covering his mouth. His shoulders shook. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "I brought her into our home. I was going to marry her. And she was." He couldn't finish the sentence. "You didn't know," Lorelai said gently. "She's good at hiding what she is. That's not an excuse." Preston's eyes were red when he looked at her. "I should have seen it. I should have known something was wrong. All those nannies quitting, the doctors finding nothing, Rosie getting worse and worse. I thought, God help me, I thought maybe it was my fault, that she missed her mother so much, she was acting out, that I was failing her by not being here enough. That's what Vivian wanted you to think." "Well, it worked," he laughed bitterly. "I let myself believe that loving someone again would fix everything, that giving Rosie a mother figure would help her heal. Instead, I gave her a monster." Lorelai wanted to offer comfort, but didn't know how. Some sins didn't have easy absolution. Preston would carry this guilt for the rest of his life, whether he deserved it or not. "What do we do now?" she asked. Preston's expression hardened into something Lorelai hadn't seen before. Pure cold fury barely contained. Now I make sure that woman never hurts another child again. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Someone answered on the second ring. Michael, it's Preston. I need you at the house immediately. Yes, now. I don't care what time it is. Bring your recording equipment. A pause. Because I'm about to get a confession and I want every word documented. He hung up and looked at Lorelai. Michael Harrison is my attorney. He'll be here in 30 minutes. When he arrives, I want you to give him copies of everything you have. Then I want you to take Rosie and leave this house. Go to a hotel. Here. He pulled out his wallet and handed her a credit card. Use this. Don't come back until I call you. What are you going to do? Something I should have done the moment I had doubts. His jaw set. I'm going to confront Vivian, and she's going to tell me the truth, all of it. She'll lie. She'll manipulate. I know that's why Michael will be recording. That's why I'm not going to tell her about the video until after she's already buried herself in lies. Preston looked at Lorelai, and she saw something in his eyes that made her believe him. I spent 2 years building companies by knowing when people are lying to me. I just didn't want to see it with her, but I see it now. Lorelai nodded slowly. Rosie's door is locked from the outside. The key is... I know where the keys are. Preston's voice cracked. I saw the locks. Vivian said they were for Rosie's safety, to keep her from wandering at night. I believed her. You couldn't have known. I should have asked Rosie. I should have listened. He straightened, composing himself. Go get my daughter. Take her somewhere safe. When this is over, I'll call you. Lorelai went upstairs. She unlocked Rosie's door with shaking hands and slipped inside. The child was asleep finally. Her burned hand wrapped in a makeshift bandage from the bathroom. Lorelai had snuck up earlier with ointment after Vivian went to bed. Rosie, she whispered gently, touching the child's shoulder. Sweetheart, wake up. Rosie's eyes opened immediately fearful. Then she saw Lorelai and relaxed slightly. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but your daddy came home and we're going to go somewhere safe for a little while. Can you get dressed? Is Miss Vivian coming? No, honey. Just you and me. Rosie was dressed in 2 minutes, clutching her worn rabbit. They went down the back stairs, avoiding the main hallway. Preston met them at the bottom, and when Rosie saw him, she ran into his arms. Daddy, he scooped her up, burying his face in her hair. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I should have been here. It's okay, Rosie whispered. You're here now. He held her for a long moment, memorizing the weight of her, the smell of her shampoo, the trust she still gave him despite everything he'd failed to protect her from. Finally, he set her down and crouched to her level. Rosie, I need you to be very brave. Can you do that for me? She nodded. Miss Lorelai is going to take you to a hotel, like a little adventure, with room service and movies. And tomorrow when you wake up, everything is going to be different. Better, I promise. You're not coming. Not yet. I have something I need to do here first. But I'll see you very soon. Rosie looked between her father and Lorelai, trying to understand. Then she asked the question that broke both their hearts. Are you going to make Miss Vivian go away? Preston's throat worked. Yes, sweetheart, I am. Forever, forever. Rosie nodded, satisfied. She took Lorelai's hand. Okay, I'm ready. The vet left through the kitchen door. Lorelai loaded Rosie into her old car, a battered sedan that looked absurd, parked beside Preston's luxury vehicles, and drove toward the nearest hotel. In the rearview mirror, she watched the Thornhill mansion recede into darkness. Whatever happened next, Rosie wouldn't have to witness it. Preston stood in the foyer waiting for his attorney, while upstairs Vivian slept peacefully in the master bedroom. The bedroom he'd shared with Catherine. The bedroom he'd let Vivian occupy because she said it would help him move on from grief. He'd been such a fool. Michael Harrison arrived 23 minutes later carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of deep concern. Preston had known Michael since college, trusted him completely, had made him godfather to Rosie, though Michael lived in Boston and rarely visited. Preston, what's going on? Preston showed him everything, the video, the documents, the photos. Michael watched in horrified silence, his face growing grimmer with each revelation. Jesus Christ! He breathed when it finished. Preston, we need to call the police right now. Not yet. First, I want to hear her admit it. I want it on record in her own words what she did. Otherwise, her lawyers will claim the video is fake, that the documents are forged. I want her confession before we bring in authorities. Michael hesitated, then nodded. He pulled recording equipment from his briefcase, a small high-quality digital recorder and a video camera no bigger than a phone. I'll hide these in the living room. You confront her there. Get her talking. I'll be in the next room monitoring everything. They set up quickly professionally. The camera went behind a decorative vase on the mantel. The audio recorder under the couch cushion. Michael tested both. Perfect quality. Ready? Michael asked. Preston nodded. His heart hammered, but his hands were steady. Rage had burned through fear, leaving only cold determination. He went upstairs and knocked on the master bedroom door. Vivienne, wake up! We need to talk. Sounds of movement. The bedside lamp clicked on. A moment later, Vivienne opened the door, wearing silk pajamas, her hair perfect, despite the hour. She had always been meticulous about appearance. Preston, you're home early. She smiled, but something flickered in her eyes. Calculation. Is everything all right? Come downstairs. Now. Her expression faltered. What's wrong? Downstairs, living room. He turned and walked away, not waiting to see if she followed. He heard her footsteps behind him, quick and light. When they reached the living room, he positioned himself where the camera would capture both of them. Vivienne stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She'd put on a robe. Still composed. Still in control. Preston, you're scaring me. What's this about? I want you to tell me about Rosie. A pause. What about her? Is she difficult? Impossible. Is that why 8 nannies quit? Vivienne relaxed slightly. This was familiar territory. You know she is. I've been telling you for months. The child has serious behavioral issues. She needs professional help. What kind of help? Psychiatric evaluation. Possibly residential treatment. I've been researching facilities. Have you, Preston's voice stayed level, found any good ones? Several. There's an excellent program in upstate New York. Dr. Venn thinks she'd be a perfect candidate. Dr. Venn, the psychiatrist you've been corresponding with. Yes, I showed you his credentials. He specializes in childhood behavioral disorders. And he thinks Rosie needs to be institutionalized. Based on my documentation, yes. Preston, I know this is hard to hear, but ignoring the problem won't make it go away. Rosie is getting worse. Those night terrors, the bedwetting, the violent outbursts. She attacked me last week. Did she, Bay? Preston took a step closer. Tell me about that. What happened? Vivienne gestured to her arm. She scratched me. Drew blood. I have photos. She was angry because I wouldn't let her have candy before dinner. She completely lost control. And how did you respond? I sent her to her room without dinner since she couldn't behave appropriately. You locked her in for her own safety and mine. When she's in that state, she's dangerous. Preston nodded slowly. What else have you done to keep her safe? I don't understand the question. The locks on her door, the strict routines, the punishments. Walk me through your methods. Vivienne's eyes narrowed. Why are you asking this now at 2 in the morning? Because I want to understand. You've been so dedicated to managing Rosie's care. I've been absent, traveling, leaving everything to you. So help me understand exactly what you've been doing. She studied him, searching for the trap. Preston kept his expression neutral, curious, open. Finally she spoke. Consistency is key with difficult children. They need firm boundaries. Consequences when they misbehave. Rosie was spoiled by Catherine. Your wife. She paused delicately. Gave her everything she wanted. No discipline, no structure. When Catherine died, Rosie expected that treatment to continue. But you provided structure. Exactly. Rules, routines, appropriate punishments when she broke them. Like what? Timeouts, removal of privileges, natural consequences. What kind of natural consequences? Vivienne's patience was fraying. Preston, where is this going? Just answer the question. Fine. If she refused to eat dinner, she didn't get breakfast. If she threw tantrums, she lost toys. If she was violent, she spent time alone until she calmed down. Basic parenting techniques. Is that all? What do you mean? I mean, were there other consequences, other methods of teaching her? Vivian's jaw tightened. I don't appreciate the Inquisition, and I don't appreciate being lied to. Preston's voice hardened. So I'll ask one more time. What other methods did you use to discipline my daughter? Nothing inappropriate. I would never. Where's Rosie right now? The question came out of nowhere. Vivian blinked. What? My daughter, where is she? In her room, asleep, obviously. Go check. Preston, go check. Vivian stared at him for a long moment, then turned and went upstairs. Preston heard doors opening, footsteps moving faster. Then silence. She reappeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. Where is she? Safe, away from you. What are you talking about, Preston, if you've taken her somewhere without telling me? I'm her father. I can take her anywhere I want. He moved to the coffee table and picked up his laptop. Come down here. There's something you need to see. Vivian descended slowly, wary now. When she reached the living room, Preston turned the laptop screen toward her and pressed play. The video started. Vivian's face appeared, filling the frame. Then Rosie's voice crying. Then the bucket. The scalding water. The screams. Vivian watched for 10 seconds before lunging for the laptop. Preston pulled it back, snapping it shut. That's illegal, Vivian hissed. Recording without consent. That won't hold up in court. Connecticut is a one-party consent state. Rosie's room. Rosie's consent. Preston's voice was ice. Try again. She's 3 years old. She can't give legal consent. Then I give consent as her parent and legal guardian. The recording is valid. Vivian's mind worked furiously. That video is taken out of context. You don't understand what you saw. Then explain it to me. She'd been misbehaving all day, screaming, breaking things. She needed to learn. By burning her. It wasn't that hot. It was warm water, a deterrent. Show me your hand. What? Put your hand in water that temperature, right now. Prove to me it's safe. Vivian's mouth opened and closed. This is ridiculous. You're right. It is ridiculous. It's ridiculous that you tortured my daughter and called it discipline. It's ridiculous that you planned to have her institutionalized so you could steal her inheritance. It's ridiculous that I almost married you. I don't know what lies that maid told you, but the maid didn't tell me anything I didn't see with my own eyes. Preston opened the laptop again and showed her the documents. These are from your office, your handwriting, your plan. $80 million. That's what Rosie's worth to you, isn't it? You're twisting everything. I was trying to help her. If she was in a facility, professionals could. Stop. Preston's voice cracked like a whip. Stop lying. I want to hear you say it. One true thing. Just one. Tell me what you did to my daughter. Vivian's mask finally slipped. Her perfect composure fractured, and beneath it lay something cold and calculating and utterly devoid of remorse. Fine. You want the truth. She was a spoiled, whining little brat who stood between me and the life I deserved. I spent 18 months pretending to care about her, listening to her cry, dealing with her needs. Do you have any idea how exhausting that was? How draining? So you hurt her. I taught her. The way my mother taught me. Pain is an excellent motivator. Your mother burned you. My mother made me strong. She made me a survivor. She taught me that weak people suffer and strong people take what they want. And I wanted the Thornhill fortune. I earned it. I put up with that child's existence. I played the devoted fiancée. I did everything right. Except get caught. Vivian laughed bitterly. That maid. That stupid, broken woman with her dead daughter and her savior complex. She ruined everything. No, Preston said quietly. You ruined everything. The moment you touched my child. She's not even your real daughter, Preston. Don't you remember Catherine had fertility problems? You used a donor egg. Rosie is genetically nobody to you. She's just a... The slap came before Preston consciously decided to do it. His palm connected with Vivian's cheek, snapping her head to the side. Silence fell. Vivian touched her face, eyes wide with shock. Then she smiled, that terrible, triumphant expression. There, you hit me. I'll have you arrested for assault. I'll tell them you've been abusing Rosie, that you're projecting onto me, that the video is fake, designed to cover your own. The front door burst open. 2 police officers entered, followed by Michael Harrison. The attorney held up his phone, where both video and audio had been streaming live to the precinct. Vivian Blackwood, the first officer said, pulling out handcuffs. You're under arrest for child abuse, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. You have the right to remain silent. The color drained from Vivian's face as understanding crashed over her. The recording equipment, the setup, the confession she'd just given, all of it captured, all of it admissible. She looked at Preston with pure hatred. You bastard! Yeah, he agreed. I am, and you're done. They handcuffed her, read her rights, led her toward the door in her silk pajamas, and robe no longer perfect, no longer in control. At the threshold, she turned back. This isn't over. My lawyers will destroy you. I'll make sure you never see that child again. Ma'am, the second officer said tiredly, you might want to exercise that right to remain silent now. They took her away. The house fell quiet. Preston stood in the living room, watching through the window as they loaded Vivian into the patrol car. Michael approached, putting a hand on his shoulder. You okay? No, Preston said honestly, but I will be. That was a hell of a risk. If she hadn't confessed, she would have. People like her can't help themselves. They have to explain, justify, make you understand how clever they are. Well, she succeeded. We have everything we need. Michael closed his briefcase. Her lawyers will try to fight it, but with that video and her confession, they won't get far. She's going to prison, Preston. Good. There'll be a trial. Rosie might have to testify. Then I'll make sure she has the best therapist in the country helping her through it. Preston pulled out his phone. I need to call Lorelai. Tell her it's safe to come home. The maid, Michael said thoughtfully. She's the one who figured it out. She's the one who saved my daughter's life. When I missed every sign, when I failed completely. You didn't know. I should have. Preston dialed Lorelai's number, but I damn well know now. The trial began 3 months later. By then Vivian's public facade had completely crumbled. The media had gotten hold of the story. Billionaire's fiancé arrested for child abuse. The video had been leaked somehow, despite court orders. It went viral. The public was horrified, outraged. Vivian's high-powered attorneys tried everything. They claimed the recording was illegal, that Preston had coerced the confession, that Lorelai had fabricated evidence. But the prosecution had too much. Medical records showing healed burns, previous nannies willing to testify, Dr. Morrison's documentation of bruises, and most damningly, the video and audio of Vivian describing exactly what she'd done and why. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Rosie didn't have to testify in person. The judge allowed a recorded interview with a child psychologist instead. Even that was devastating. The little girl, now 4 years old, speaking in a small, clear voice about the things that had been done to her. Lorelai sat in the courtroom every day, Preston beside her. They'd become something more than employer and employee in the months since that terrible night. Not quite family, but closer than friends, bound by shared trauma and determination to see justice done. When the verdict came guilty on all counts, Preston closed his eyes and exhaled a breath he'd been holding for months. Sentencing came a week later. The judge was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and an iron spine. Miss Blackwood, she said, looking down from the bench, you had every advantage, wealth, education, opportunity, and you chose to use those advantages to systematically torture a child, not out of ignorance, not out of mental illness, but out of pure calculated greed. Vivian stood in her orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, face blank. The law allows me to sentence you to anywhere from 3 to 20 years. I've reviewed the evidence extensively. I've seen the video of what you did. I've read Rosie Thornhill's testimony, and I've considered your complete lack of remorse. A pause. I'm sentencing you to 8 years in state prison with no possibility of parole. Upon release, you will be registered as a child abuser. You will never be allowed to work with children again, and you will have a lifetime restraining order preventing any contact with Rosie Thornhill or Preston Thornhill. Vivian's attorneys immediately began arguing for appeal. The judge denied it. Take her away. As they led Vivian out, she looked back once at Preston. Her eyes held nothing but emptiness, no regret, no understanding of what she'd done wrong. Just rage at being caught. Preston didn't flinch. He watched until she disappeared, then turned to Lorelai. "It's over," he said quietly. "It's over," she agreed. They left the courthouse through a back entrance, avoiding reporters, and drove back to the Thornhill mansion where Rosie waited with her new therapist, Dr. Sarah Foster. The child ran to meet them at the door. "Is the bad lady gone forever?" Preston knelt down. "Yes, sweetheart, forever." Rosie threw her arms around his neck. "Can we have pancakes for dinner?" He laughed, the sound rusty but real. "Every night if you want." "Just sometimes," Rosie decided wisely. "Because too much syrup makes my tummy hurt." That night, the three of them, Preston, Lorelai, and Rosie, ate pancakes at the kitchen table. They made a mess, they laughed, and for the first time in nearly a year, the house felt like a home. 4 months passed in gradual healing. Rosie attended therapy twice a week. The nightmares decreased. The bedwetting stopped. She started preschool, real preschool, with other children where she made friends and learned that not all adults were dangerous. Preston sold his company, not all of it, just enough to step back from day-to-day operations. He couldn't be CEO and present father simultaneously. The choice was obvious. Lorelai stayed, not as a maid anymore. Preston had promoted her to something he called family manager, with a salary that made her gasp and benefits that included sponsored citizenship. But the title didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd become part of their small, broken, healing family. She moved from the back room into a proper guest suite, had her own space, her own life. But she ate dinner with them most nights, read Rosie bedtime stories, went to parent-teacher conferences with Preston. Slowly, carefully, they were building something new from the rubble of what had been destroyed. One afternoon, Rosie asked Lorelai the question she had been dreading. "Do you still miss Emmy?" They were in the garden planting flowers. Rosie loved flowers, now bright ones that grew toward the sun. "Every day," Lorelai answered honestly. "But missing her doesn't hurt quite so much anymore. Because you have me now. Because I have you now and your daddy. And because Emmy would want me to be happy." Rosie nodded, processing this. "I miss my mommy too, but I don't remember her very much. That's okay, your daddy remembers her. And he can tell you stories." "He does. He says mommy would have liked you." Lorelai's eyes stung. "I would have liked her too." They planted petunias in silence. Dirt under their fingernails, sun on their faces. Healing didn't happen in grand moments. It happened in small ones, in flowers and pancakes and bedtime stories, in the slow, patient rebuilding of trust. 8 months after the trial, Lorelai received an invitation in the mail. The Children's Advocacy Center was hosting their annual gala. Preston Thornhill had been named Philanthropist of the Year for his donations to child abuse prevention programs, and Lorelai Winters was being honored with the Guardian of Light Award. "I can't accept this," she told Preston, staring at the invitation. "I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone would do." "No," Preston said firmly. "You did what no one else did. 8 nannies walked away. 7 doctors missed the signs. I was blind. You were the only one brave enough to stand between a child and danger. You deserve recognition." "I don't want recognition. I just wanted Rosie safe." "I know. That's exactly why you deserve it." The gala was held at the Fairfield Luxury Hotel, a sprawling complex with crystal chandeliers and views of the Sound. Lorelai wore a dress Preston had bought her over her protests, elegant navy blue, simple but beautiful. She felt like an imposter. Rosie attended with them, wearing a yellow dress she'd picked out herself. She was excited, bouncing on her toes, holding both Preston's hand and Lorelai's as they entered the ballroom. The ceremony was overwhelming. Speeches, videos, testimonials from families who'd been helped by the center's programs. When they called Lorelai's name, she walked to the stage on shaking legs. The presenter was the judge who'd sentenced Vivian. She smiled warmly as she handed Lorelai the Crystal Award. "This honor goes to someone who embodies what it means to be a guardian," the judge said into the microphone. Lorelai Winters wasn't Rosie Thornhill's mother. She wasn't a social worker or police officer. She was a housekeeper who'd lost her own child to tragedy. But when she saw another child in danger, she didn't look away. She didn't tell herself it wasn't her business. She documented, she reported, and she stood between that child and harm even when it meant risking everything. Applause filled the room, Lorelai's vision blurred with tears. "Ms. Winters, would you like to say a few words?" Lorelai looked out at the crowd, hundreds of faces, strangers. Then she saw Preston and Rosie in the front row. Rosie waved, grinning. "I don't have a speech prepared," Lorelai said, her voice shaking. "I'm not good at public speaking, but I want to say something to anyone out there who's in the position I was in. If you see a child suffering, speak up. Report it. Document it. Don't tell yourself it's not your place or that you might be wrong. Because children can't always protect themselves. They need adults to be brave for them." She paused, looking directly at Rosie. "I couldn't save my own daughter, but maybe because of that loss, I recognized what was happening to Rosie. Maybe my grief gave me eyes to see her pain. I don't know. What I do know is that saving her saved me too. Gave me purpose again. Gave me hope." She raised the Crystal Award. "This isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who chooses courage over comfort, who speaks up instead of staying silent. Thank you." The applause was deafening. Lorelai stepped down from the stage, and Rosie ran to her, wrapping small arms around her waist. "You were so brave up there," Rosie whispered, "just like you were brave for me." Lorelai knelt down, cupping the child's face. "We were brave together, sweetheart." Preston joined them, his hand resting on Lorelai's shoulder. For a moment, they stood like that, a unit, a family, 3 people who'd found each other in the wreckage. Later that evening, after Rosie fell asleep in the car on the drive home, Preston carried her to bed. Lorelai followed, helping him tuck her in. They stood in the doorway together, watching her sleep. "She looks peaceful," Preston said quietly. "She is peaceful, finally. Because of you. Because she's safe. Because justice was served. Because she knows she's loved." Preston turned to Lorelai, his expression serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Would you consider staying not as an employee, but as family, permanently?" Lorelai's breath caught. "Preston, I'm not proposing," he said quickly. "Not yet, maybe not ever if that's not what you want. But I need you to know that you're not the help anymore. You're not someone we hired. You're someone we love. Someone Rosie needs. Someone I need." "I already was staying," Lorelai said softly. "Where else would I go?" He smiled, relieved. "Nowhere. You're home." "Yeah," she agreed, looking at sleeping Rosie. "I am." 1 year after Vivian's arrest, on a cool October morning, the 3 of them visited Catherine's grave. Preston brought roses, white ones, Catherine's favorite. Rosie brought a drawing she'd made, a picture of a woman with dark hair and kind eyes surrounded by clouds and angels. "For Mommy," she explained, placing it carefully on the headstone. "So she knows I remember her." They stood in silence for several minutes. Then Preston spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Catherine, I need to tell you something. I failed. I brought someone dangerous into our home, and she hurt our daughter. For that, I'll never forgive myself." Lorelai reached for his hand. "But I also need to thank you," Preston continued, "because somehow you sent us exactly who we needed. Lorelai saved Rosie when I couldn't. She stepped in and fought for our girl. And I think you'd want me to tell you that we're okay now. We're healing. We're building something new." He touched the headstone gently. "I'll always love you. Rosie will always know her mother. But I'm not alone anymore. We're not alone. And I hope, wherever you are, you approve." Rosie leaned against Lorelai's leg. "Mama Claire," she said quietly, not replacing Catherine, adding to the family, creating space for both mothers to exist in her heart. Lorelai's throat closed. She'd never asked Rosie to call her that. The child had chosen it on her own months ago, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence. "I think your mommy approves," Lorelai said, stroking Rosie's hair. "I think she's glad you're happy." They stayed a while longer, talking to Catherine, sharing stories, letting Rosie ask questions about the mother she barely remembered. When they finally left, walking back toward the car, Rosie skipped between them, holding both their hands. "Can we get hot chocolate?" she asked. "With extra marshmallows." "Absolutely," Preston agreed. "The biggest hot chocolates they have." "And then can we go to the park?" "If you want." "I want." Rosie swung their joined hands. "I want to go really high on the swings today, higher than I've ever gone before." "Then that's what we'll do," Lorelai promised. They drove to the park, got hot chocolate with absurd amounts of marshmallows, pushed Rosie on the swings until she laughed so hard she had hiccups, watched her play with other children, fearless, now confident, healing. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Preston and Lorelai sat on a bench while Rosie built castles in the sandbox. "Do you ever think about what would have happened?" Preston asked quietly. "If you hadn't been there?" "Every day," Lorelai admitted. "But I was there. That's what matters. I keep thinking about all the children who don't have someone like you, who suffer in silence because no one notices, no one cares enough to look." "I know." Lorelai watched Rosie carefully stack sand. "That's why I've been thinking about going back to school, getting my degree in social work. Maybe I could help other children, use what I learned here." Preston turned to her surprised. "You'd be amazing at that." "I don't know, it's just an idea." "It's a great idea, and I'll support it however I can. Tuition, childcare for Rosie, whatever you need." "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm offering." He met her eyes. "You saved my daughter Lorelai. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you," she smiled. "Then I guess I'm going back to school." Rosie ran over, then covered in sand, grinning. "Look what I made." They admired her castle, lopsided but proud, with a flag made from a stick and a leaf. "It's beautiful," Lorelai said. "What's it called?" Rosie thought for a moment. "The Happy Castle, where everyone is safe and no one is scared." "Perfect," Preston said, lifting her into his arms despite the sand. "That's exactly what it should be called." They walked back to the car as twilight settled over the park. Three people who'd been broken and lost, who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances, who'd chosen to build something new from the pieces. The happy castle, Lorelai thought, where everyone is safe and no one is scared. It wasn't just Rosie's sandbox creation. It was what they'd built together, what they protected every day, what they'd defend with everything they had. Vivian Blackwood sat in her cell counting days. 8 years, 7 years, and 8 months remaining. She would get out eventually. And when she did, but that was a story for another time. Tonight, in a house that had once held a darkness, lights glowed warm against the evening. Inside, a father read his daughter a bedtime story while a woman who'd lost everything and found something better listened from the doorway. And they lived happily ever after. Preston read, closing the book. "Not ever after," Rosie corrected sleepily. "Just for today. Tomorrow, we get to be happy again." "You're right," Preston agreed, kissing her forehead. "Every day is a new chance to be happy." Lorelai turned off the light. They left Rosie's door open, no more locks, no more fear, and went downstairs together. Some heroes wore capes, others wore aprons, and carried broken hearts that somehow still knew how to love. Some families were born. Others were forged in fire and survived to tell the tale. This was theirs. Imperfect, scarred, real. And in the end, that was enough.